welcome back to the Earth Dawn Survival Guide, episode 101. We got here, triple digits. This is the podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, and game masters, and the questers that are Josh and Dan. I am Dan. With me is Josh.
I am Josh. Yes, indeed. We are here. We're going to be palindromatical tonight.
Exactly. We're going to go with that word as well. Also quizzical and arrowantical, because we have emails and a dragon to talk about. So we'll be getting to Vasdenjas, the late Vasdenjas here as we get there. But first, on episode 101, we have our first email in the triple digits, and it is a doozy. We got a couple of them here this week. Hey, you two. This is from Sebastian. I've heard you talk about alchemists today, and that's actually been something I have been looking into making for one of my players, as he had specifically requested it. And let's just say up front that both the concept as a discipline and within the world are more than fishy. But since this is just for my home game, it's something of a side project that gets about an hour of thought put into it every week or two. My idea behind the mechanics was to give them a magician-like structure, but have their talents mostly centered around scholarly pursuits, mostly talent options for wizard and weaponsmith, and to throw in some wilderness and nature, mostly borrowing from scouts. The Circle 5 ability would be like the makeshift forge ability of the weaponsmith, but with an alchemy lab instead of spells. They would have concoctions, which are learned in the same way as spells. These would be thrown, of course, because I love throwing weapons and hate to miss a chance to give them that talent some more relevance. What I mean with magician-like structures was to give them matrices that act as containers for ingredients rather than spells. Think of them as a very limited versions of the astral pocket talent, and then a list of spell-like concoctions that mix ingredients from these containers. Each concoction would be given a number of keywords like elemental spells, but these keywords would then be related to categories of ingredients, say poisons, herbs, spores, tinctures, catalysts, etc. The exact keywords are still a work in progress. Not too many, not too few. So an alchemist would eventually have a container matrices for each ingredient category if they so choose, and filling these would be part of their karma ritual and maybe somewhat up to GM discretion with alchemy and botany tests. Big hole to fill there, conceptually. Instead of weaving threads, they would have to beat a mixing difficulty with some concoctions taking multiple rounds, like weaving multiple threads, and air quotes casting the concoction would be more like literal by just throwing it. Haha. Damaging concoctions, let's call one sorrel acid, would have to beat the target's physical defense, and if they are area effects, then you probably shouldn't throw them near your allies, just like fireballs. As for healing concoctions, let's say to throwing a last chance like concoction, they would have to make 2 mixing tests against a 10 Circle 6 equivalent spell, and then they could throw it at their deadish ally. They could add extra ingredients like extra threads to add +2 to the associated tests. A healing concoction would have the herb and tinctures keyword, while a damaging one could be poison and catalyst. Each would require the associated matrix containers to be raised to the rank the concoction was learned. To support a Circle 6 concoction, you'd need both matrix containers to be rank 6. Still a bit hung up on ideas on how to make this stuff scale later on, but there are some ideas in my head, like adding second shot to replace concise casting, and something like a quick mix talent to replace spliced weave. Now, there are still a lot of holes to fill, but that's the general idea behind it. I currently have a Circle 1 through 8 about 70% done, but I'm very much aware that this discipline will only ever see use in my home game. And then there is the issue of Circles 9 through 15, which gets really tricky as I have to further abstract the concepts and increase the power. Also, designing concoctions, spells, is really hard, so kudos to Morgan for not going crazy. Best regards, Sebastian. Josh, thoughts?
And that's
cool. And that's why we don't do it?
I'm glad you're enjoying what you're doing there. I mean, there's some interesting ideas there. It reminds me, I can't remember the name of it right now, but there's a Pathfinder class that's like an alchemist kind of thing that does a similar idea. I seem to recall, and I don't know whether Sebastian was involved in the discussion or is on the Discord, because there was a discussion that popped up on the Fast Games Discord after the alchemist question thing went live on the podcast, and some discussion about that. And a lot of it, I seem to recall, did kind of relate to the idea of, some of it at least wanted to, I want to throw magical grenades kind of thing.
Well, who doesn't?
Which, I get that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel particularly in flavor for Earth Dawn, or at least not enough of one to be something that requires an entire discipline.
Fair.
I mean, I kind of like the breakdown that's being done in that of different keywords and needing to scale those up in order to make stuff on the fly, and maybe modeling a little bit after spellcasters in terms of how that works. I mean, that's a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that Sebastian's reaction is, there's a lot of work that goes into this stuff.
Than I thought.
Yeah, and it's not something that is likely to ever see any kind of appearance in a mainline Earth Dawn product.
Yeah.
Morgan did bring something up in that discussion on the Discord a few weeks back about how the problem with making alchemy a talent is that once you do that, the cat's out of the bag and there's no way to put it back in. There are some potential issues that come about as a result of opening that box. Like, making it available to Questors of Garland as a devotion is already kind of pushing the line in that regard. But just making it available as a talent, because if you make it available as a talent, that means that any human with versatility therefore could conceivably pick it up. And that just does all kinds of
bad things.
Human versatility is awesome. Don't get me wrong. Versatility is amazing. But any time that we're coming up with a talent, or any time that we are coming up with something new like that, the question becomes, well, if this is something that would be really well suited to one of the existing disciplines, why don't they have it yet? Which is why, talking about paths, there aren't a whole lot of new talents that are available, and most of the ones that are very specifically tailored to a particular thing and are gated behind those path requirements.
Yeah.
And a lot of the more broadly useful stuff appears as knacks, because then we can give it as a knack to multiple disciplines that would conceivably have access to it.
Fair enough.
You know, when you get this far mechanically into the development life cycle, there's a lot of stuff that you need to consider when you're coming up with new things.
It's very granular. I mean, one little grain of sand will stop this cog machine working.
Right. And there's a lot of knock-on effects of things. One of the things that I like to hear, to a certain extent, from people who come to 4th edition and are like, I read it and I didn't have a very good reaction to this thing particularly, but then we played around with it and we realized how much that interacts with all of these other subsystems. And so if you wanted to change this one thing, you kind of need to think about how that has carry-on effects 2 or 3
levels down,
degrees of remove from it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was not just a case of, certainly as we've gotten farther along, it is less and less a case of, oh, we just thought something was cool and decided to change it.
Yeah.
There were reasons why, in one sense, that we chose 5 as the multiple for additional successes, as opposed to 4 or 6 or whatever, like mathematically might have been more true to the whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's that multiples of 5 are easier to deal with, because multiples of 5 are also multiples of 10.
Yes.
Or lead into 10s, and 10s are easy to deal with. And again, that's why most of the time the bonuses from stuff are in multiples of 2, because multiples of 2 are also relatively easy to handle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's easier learning.
I'm rambling now.
No, you're fine. First 10 minutes, that's what we do. No worries. Next email is from Chad. Hi, Josh. Really, Chad? Really? Just hi, Josh? Really?
Hi, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. My Earthdawn group loves the EDSG podcast, and we frequently bring it up at sessions. Our Elven Weaponsmith is quite possibly your biggest fan. We try not to count how many times he says, Josh says, at the table, but it's a lot. He submitted questions before, and I'm sure there are more to come. We designed a group symbol when created a group true pattern, and I'm surprising them with vinyl stickers for Christmas. I'd like to send some to you and
awesome.
Dan too. I love the idea of the vinyl stickers. If you wouldn't mind sharing a P.O. box or address, if that's weird and you don't want to share, no worries at all. We're not going to do it on the air, by the way. Thank you for all the work you do making our hobby better. Best wishes for you and the podcast in 2022, Chad. He sent along the art. I love the art. I love the group symbol.
He did send along the picture. I will try and remember to post the picture on the Twitter feed when this episode goes live.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get that info to you, Chad, because I like it when people make cool stuff and
Send
give it to us.
I'm all about free swag, man. All for it. Absolutely. So, next email up is from Lee. Hi, guys. See? Plural. If I missed it, congratulations on making your episodical milestone. Historically, you have Archimedes, Carthage's greatest thinker, and if it wasn't for those pesky Romans, who knows what other things he could have come up with. Some pop culture references for alchemy appearing in mainstream entertainment. There's 300 and Game of Thrones. In 300, there were the grenade-throwing wizards. I forget the exact term used in the film for them. But to me, they say 300. Throwing weapon, the one specialist Earthdawn doesn't have, apart from Morgan's unofficial blog listing. Alchemy, there's no other explanation for iron or clay exploding pots in that context. And special group membership, patronage by Xerxes. Game of Thrones, green explodey concoction of death. Special group membership, more patronage here yet again. Yep, and you're right, it's nowhere near enough for discipline in its own right. But there's something minimal there for someone to work on if they do want to take it forward as a path. Anywho, that's all from me again. Hope you both have a great Christmas and an awesome 2022. Lee.
Thank you, Lee. Yeah, not really any questions there.
No,
but that's cool. Appreciate that.
I like the 2 cents thrown in.
The problem with throwing weapons is that the range is more limited compared to missile weapons. You generally cannot have as many of them
handy
on hand. I mean, you can carry like a whole bunch of throwing daggers or whatever, but when it comes to the balance of damage that you would do using, say, forge weapon.
Yeah.
Right? The problem that you run into is that you can use forge weapon on a bow or crossbow, and that damage increase applies to all of the ammunition that it fires. So you're only increasing the damage capability of one item. If you are trying to do the same for throwing weapons, you need to do that for each individual dagger, hawk hatchet, whatever.
Yep.
And that can get a little bit unbalanced in terms of the cost that you need to have, or you sink all of it into one weapon, which you throw, and then you don't have any more for the rest of the fight.
Yeah.
Unless you like move to go and pick it up, or you develop some kind of, or I mean, basically you could use call missile.
Mm-hmm.
The archer talent does allow you, I think, to recall thrown weapons as well.
You are correct.
But still, it doesn't work so great, generally speaking. And I don't recall the details about Morgan's attempt to make a throwing weapons type character. I'm sure it's decent, but I don't remember what kind of special tricks that he cooked up in order to make it a little bit more viable as a style.
Haven't seen that entry, but I'm sure Morgan did a bang-up job as usual, so. But it's not official. Knock yourself out. On to Aaron, our last email, and then we'll get on to the legacy of Vasdenjas. Hi, both. See? Both. There we go. Amazing job as always. I'm keeping up with the episodes, especially enjoying the dragon episodes, so keep up with the good work, and thank you. No one's mentioning the Paths episodes, but they all like to hear about the dragons. Just saying. My one question today is...
Well, dragons are cool.
Well, yeah, I know. We got questions. If Icewing and Mountain Shadow are from the same clutch/brothers, how come Icewing is considered an elder dragon and Mountain Shadow only a great dragon? I use the word only for emphasis. Let's be honest, it's nothing to be sneered at. I was under the impression that seniority in the Dragon Society is based on age primarily, or is there something in the deeds that they do, or their knowledge or political influence maybe that would offer a distinction between the two? And if so, what is that distinction in this case? Thanks as always for the weekly entertainment, and Merry Christmas. Aaron.
I don't personally consider there to be a difference between elder and great within that context. I think they are both titles or honorifics that are given to dragons who have achieved that lofty status.
Yeah.
So I don't consider there to be a difference between the two in that regard. I think that's being a little bit too nitpicky on the word choice.
Fair.
And I would need to like go and look and see, is this something that's actually what the context of those words are used in the essays and the whatever that the outcast is. There's a whole lot of analysis and research that I would need to do. But my gut reaction is there is nothing that has actually indicated that there's a difference between elder dragon or great dragon. So I wouldn't consider I would consider that a distinction without a difference.
Yeah, it's maybe he's hatched a minute earlier, whatever. But I'm just making that up.
Yeah, I don't know. And they're dragons. Yes, age, probably deeds and whatnot maybe have something to do with it, but that's something that we don't have an actual lot of insight on.
Interchangeable words, no big deal. Thank you, one and all, for emailing us and for the sticker. Love that as well. And if you have any more free swag, we'd love to have that too. So anyway, on to the Aeroentical portion of our show today. Episode 101, Vasdenjas, the late, no longer here, a.k.a. Talespeaker, because that is how the Outcast referred to him, and that is one of his many nicknames. He actually has a few nicknames: Master of Secrets, Eater of Cities, Vasdenjas the Terrible, and, of course, Talespeaker. So he's got a few nicknames out there.
So first of all...
Yes.
I would like to defend Talespeaker's honor here. It was just the one city, okay?
Yes. We were going to get to that tale eventually, but yeah, it's just one city, and they had it coming because Thera kind of started a thing going on, sowed some discontent, because he was trying to teach them how to protect themselves during the Scourge, and Thera couldn't have that. You can't give those things away for free. And so the Therans sowed some discontent in, was it Gateway? Yeah, Gateway. And they tried to roust him from his lair, and that's not what you do to a dragon who's trying to be nice to you. And so they brought it upon themselves, to Josh's point. Just the one city.
Just the one.
Just the one.
And Vasdenjas brought that point up originally.
Yes. They brought this upon themselves. End of story.
Right.
Because that's what you do. Anyway, Vasdenjas, and this isn't even part of the 4th edition thing. This is actually just, I think this happened in 2nd edition as well, but you went and kept it. Vasdenjas was killed at the Battle of Vivane right before Skypoint fell. And so that, I think, is the one holdover from 2nd edition to make it into 4th. Am I speaking out of turn on that, or is that correct?
I am pretty sure that was something that was included in the original outline.
Yes, because it was in the 2nd edition book.
Right. And so that, I think the circumstances, the exact details of how he died are a little bit different, but the death of Vasdenjas was part of the original outline.
Fair. So the plot point remains the same, just how it got there maybe a little different in the telling. Nothing big there. So, Outcast kind of refers to Vasdenjas as more or less a dragon troubadour, if there were one, because he is a teller of tales, the information giver, and information collector. And so Vasdenjas kind of operated like a troubadour, a name-giver troubadour, because he would collect the information, disseminate the information. Not that anybody had a real huge disagreement with giving the name-givers information, per se. Sometimes the Outcast did. Maybe the Council not necessarily did. Mountain Shadow didn't have a problem with it as well. But Outcast calls him a hypocrite in a lot of places throughout this entire essay. That, yeah, he liked the name-giver races. He tried to teach them like children, but he also believed that the name-giver races should be, honoring the dragons and deferential to them and subservient and so forth and so on. So take your pick. Outcast's word is Outcast's word. And whatever that's good for, kind of go from there a little bit. But Vasdenjas was the Loremaster of Dragonkind, which is the keeper of the history of the dragons and all the movings, shakings, and goings on. But it was also the keeper of all the dragon etiquette and their traditions as they were handed down from time immemorial. So Vasdenjas' lair contains all this knowledge because Vasdenjas, as I said, is no more. But yeah, that was the role he took upon himself after Thermail. So Vasdenjas basically believed in passing on knowledge to the lesser races to both educate them and guide them. But he did kind of believe that the younger races are to be treated like children. So don't give them too much responsibility or power because they can't handle it.
Right.
However, Vasdenjas, being the great dragon that he was, had a great mind, was clever of tongue, but kind of avoided physical conflict, because when you can talk your way out of a fight, you do. But he did have sharp claws and sharp teeth. He was not exactly a slacker in that dimension. So if he needed to bring it, oh, wait, he burned down Gateway. He could bring it, but one of those things. And in the telling of the tale, as I said, I like to go through, the descriptions of the dragons. So just so everyone gets a picture of what Vasdenjas looked like. He was basically the size of a larger frigate, an airship, but his scales were the color of the stone he used to rest on. So it's kind of a tan gray, kind of a dun color, D-U-N. I had to go look that one up, actually, because horses are sometimes dun colored. But his coloring faded to yellow on his wings, and his horns were rather straight, so not curly, pretty straight horns. So if you're looking for a description, there you are. But he did lair on Mount Wyrmspire in the Scytha Mountains. Wait, isn't that where Gateway was? Is it in the Scytha Mountains?
I think so. I mean, we talked about Asante.
Yes.
The female dragon, because she was wrapped up very heavily with the dwarves of Scytha and came into conflict with Vasdenjas over what was going on with the dwarfs and things like that.
Yes. Kind of where this all came from. But not only, since he wasn't exactly a very physical dragon, as we said, as Outcast says, more mental and, a silver tongue character as you were. He was very highly knowledgeable in magic, and his magical skills were mostly wizard spells, illusionist spells, nethermancer spells, a little elementalism here and there. But he was really prolific at dragonsight, which is pattern reading, and being the keeper of knowledge and the gatherer of knowledge. If you can read a pattern about a person or place or a thing, that's deeper knowledge than most people can discern. And so that's what he liked to do. And he was really, really good at pattern reading, and also in thread magic. And along with Icewing, because he partnered with Icewing quite frequently, he also helped to develop the Dance of the Blue Spirit for Drake creation.
Mm-hmm.
So the interesting thing is he had a couple of things about when he died, in whichever way he died for 4th edition. When he died, he left behind a lair, which has not been reclaimed because the Ritual of Succession has not quite yet been performed by the dragons. Is that right? Or has that not been?
That is not right.
Okay.
That is not right. We just haven't revealed
Fair.
if any dragon has claimed the lair on Mount Wyrmspire.
Mm-hmm.
But there absolutely would have been the Rite of Succession that happened soon after his death, where the title of Loremaster got passed to Mountain Shadow.
Gotcha.
And the distribution of his other stuff. Now, I don't think that any of the other great dragons would have had any interest in claiming his lair, but it's very possible that one of his sort of allied adult dragons might have claimed that space in the wake of his death. But that particular detail is not something that has been
published yet,
revealed or explored.
No, fair. Because the essay in the 2nd edition book does say that it hasn't been decided or determined, but between 2nd edition and 4th edition, there's a little bit of time in there. So
I went back to the original Barsave at War outline.
Gotcha.
From 1st edition.
Yes.
And it does talk about the in the days following his death, the great dragons of Barsave engage in the Rite of Succession, contesting ownership of his possessions.
Gotcha.
So that's something that happens relatively soon after his passing. And of course, 4th edition is set half a dozen years later. So
exactly.
Even if it takes a little bit of time.
In dragon chronology, yeah.
Yeah. I think the only detail that really has been settled on is that Mountain Shadow is the new Loremaster. And that is largely because of legacy considerations.
Fair.
Tied into like Shadowrun stuff and whatnot.
Oh, yeah. Make all that tie together.
And I don't see any reason why it would be anyone else.
I was trying to figure out, just because I hadn't gotten to the Barsave at War outline, I was trying to figure out, did we already cover who the new Loremaster is? Because we've done every dragon except this one and couldn't find it. So I'm like, nah, it's okay. It just wasn't in the essays in the Dragon source book from second edition. So that's okay. I'm glad you updated us on the unpublished.
Yeah, I was just doing a quick scan of the GM's guide, the 4th edition GM's guide, because if it was mentioned, that's where it would be mentioned.
Fair.
But it's not mentioned in there, or at least the term Loremaster, whether as one word or two words, does not show up in that book.
Fair.
So I guess I can sort of revise that and say officially there has not been any details released on that. In my own head, it's Mountain Shadow, unless we can come up with a compelling reason
for it not to be.
For somebody else to have it.
Yeah.
In which case that will be revealed in a book when it matters.
Fair. I like that answer because I think Mountain Shadow makes the most amount of sense anyway.
Yeah. I don't like the idea ultimately of locking anything down that has not yet been published in a book. So it is not revealed, as far as I know, in any 4th edition book who the current Dragon Loremaster is. In my brain, it's probably Mountain Shadow, but that is subject to change if we find a more interesting answer when we need one.
I'm okay with that.
Well, you better be.
I have no say in the matter, so I'm okay with that. Listeners, be okay with that. End of story. So basically, Vasdenjas, great dragon that he was, Talespeaker, left a few things behind upon his death, as you do when you die. Not only is his lair likely filled with memory crystals, full of history and etiquette and traditions and who did what in dragon history, but also he left behind a few servants. He did have a few Namegivers who came to see him and informed him, but it's also speculated by the Outcast that those were probably more or less the vast majority of the drakes that he created. Maybe a couple of adventuring groups, maybe a couple of adepts came in as well to talk about things and exchange information, but more than likely it was just his drakes coming to see him in human form, tell him tales that he didn't otherwise know about, but otherwise he didn't really have a lot of animal servants. He preferred the Namegivers. He liked an intelligent conversation and people who could do things of their own volition and make decisions more or less in an intelligent manner. He would occasionally use some minor spirits, but not very often. But he did make a lot of drakes, and he let them travel. But here's the funny thing. Outcast does not know the names of these drakes. So there's a nice little entryway for some game masters to use for how to include the legacy of Vasdenjas, perhaps.
Yeah. One thing actually that's very curious with regards to Vasdenjas and the essay, whether you're looking at the original Dragon sourcebook version or the revised second edition, because the original version, of course, does not refer to him being dead because he wasn't dead.
Yeah.
He would not have died until after that book was released. But many of the dragons in the book that we have talked about thus far, it does mention drakes, names of their drakes, if they have them. Mm-hmm. It talks about them to a certain extent. Vasdenjas doesn't have any drakes that are named. He has drakes. We know he has drakes, but we don't know who they are.
Yeah.
So that's great. That's like an open thing to fill in. One thing that's very curious, though, is that there are several adult dragons that are named in the essay as his followers and allies, which we don't get in any of the other dragon essays. Like, we have Charcoal Grin and Asante and Night Sky. Like, we've got some adult dragons that are named and described, but we don't get anything where here are 3 or 4 adult dragons that lair in the Dragon Mountains and are allied with Mountain Shadow.
Yeah.
They were from eggs that he raised and whatnot. We don't get that for any of the other dragons, except for Vasdenjas.
Yeah, which I found wonderful because he was actually in charge of this clutch. And so after they hatched...
Right. This was the clutch of eggs that Thermail had when Thermail died.
Yes.
When Thermail impaled herself upon the peak of Mount Wyrmspire, which is where it got its name.
Yes.
And so that is where, that's part of the reason why Vasdenjas like took over her lair and basically took the care of the eggs upon himself.
And these are the ones that he raised as they were still in their shells. And then after, of course, they emerged from their shells, if they hatched, these 3 all lair within the side of the mountains. So probably maybe 1 or 2 might drop by his previous lair, but otherwise they may have their own lair not too far away, in fact. So you might see these 3 because Hydra's Bane is a female with dusky blue scales and ivory claws. Greisval is a male albino, so he's stark white through the red eyes. He's otherwise known as the Phantom Dragon or the Ghost of Scytha because he's frequently seen in the air above Gateway. And Greisval does hire adepts, knows nethermancy, and really approves of the horror stalkers and likes to, guide them as much as he possibly can. And Lotiara is a female. Don't have her description, but I kind of just imagine her as being red because we have blue, white, and why not red? But Lotiara also has followed in Vasdenjas' footsteps as being the pattern reader as well. And so she likes to actually help out the adepts for a price, kind of like Icewing, in if you have a magic item or whatever, have her go read it for you because she's got, dragonsight and she can probably be better at it than most Namegivers. But those are the 3.
Yeah, those are the 3 that were from Thermael's last clutch, the ones that Vasdenjas raised. And each of them can provide interesting hooks and opportunities depending on what you're doing. Greisval would be a dragon that would be a patron of any groups that are looking to explore or uncover secrets or information or delving into the ruins of the dwarf kingdom of Scytha. You've got Lotiara kind of filling in one sense the role that Vasdenjas did as a scholar and in contact with the younger races.
Yeah.
There's a word that I'm looking for, liaison.
Yeah, it's a good word.
With the younger races and speaking with them. And Hydra's Bane, so named because she is obsessed with hunting down and slaying hydras. And also tracking down information about ways to possibly undo the magic that was used to create them in the first place.
Yeah. So,
and I think it's actually, that you've got Vasdenjas and his domain is sort of, in a sense, unclaimed as far as great dragons go.
Yeah.
But that these 3 close adult dragon allies, young, but still adult dragons, are all kind of in that area pursuing their own agendas. It would be interesting as a potential story hook or campaign idea or something if you're playing around those lines. Obviously, if you're dealing with the Denerastus and Aeopos because of their connection with Hydras in the first place, as revealed in the essay, that's something that could tie them in. Dealing with adult dragons, we talked about Asante and Night Sky and what's going on with them in terms of their relationship to draconic politics and the relationships between the great dragons and so forth, and how that interaction and their relationship with dragon society thus far is kind of different to these other 3 who are a bit more traditionalist and were raised by the now fallen former lore speaker or Loremaster.
Yeah.
And I like that we actually do get some additional insights, characters that actually Greisval and Lotiara both get mentioned in the original Bar-Savit War outline.
Nice.
They are actually present there at the Battle of Sky Point where Vasdenjas falls and go berserk and attack the Therans and then fly off to let the other dragons know what has happened. So they actually are a presence that could have potentially served as an ongoing hook or story idea.
Yeah.
Again, looking at these older products, particularly the ones at the tail end, and revisiting them, for me, for the first time in a while, not having had a real reason to dive into them before.
Yeah.
But to find these ready-to-go hooks and ideas that could be developed in numerous ways going forward is still great. It's still wonderful to kind of find these and going, okay, well, we know how some of the hooks that were in the earlier books paid off in later ones. These are hooks that were kind of played out there sort of towards the end. What could have potentially been done with them other than just like, hey, these things are out there, and if we decide that we want to hang something on them later on, they're there and ready to go.
Yeah. I liked them all. I think Vasdenjas was given enough room posthumously to still fulfill. They did a good job with developing him as an independent personality and not just a copycat of another dragon.
Well, Vasdenjas also had the advantage of being the dragon that was most developed as a personality.
Yeah.
Because he was the narrator of Creatures of Barsave. We get a lot of insight into him as a character.
Yes.
As an individual, because of the way that he talks about these creatures, that we don't get that same kind of insight into Aban or Usun or Icewing. We kind of get a good chunk of it for Mountain Shadow through his appearances in the early Earthdawn novels, but also just by extension, knowing that he is Dunkelzahn and all of the characterization that he got in the Shadowrun era, and a lot of that we can kind of reflect back into the past, knowing that at least originally this was the same individual after, centuries of learning and growth and whatever. Much like, as we've been going through these essays, we get nice insight in some ways into the personality and character of the Outcast because of the way that he's talking about these other individuals. And so it's great. I haven't said that often enough lately. The death of Vasdenjas in one way was really great because it shakes things up a little bit. It is a character that, even if you might not have had him be a big presence in your actual game at the table, his presence within the books.
In the setting.
But because of his presence within the books, within Creatures of Barsave, within what would have been the first half of the Dragon's book, right? So we would have had a whole book and half of another one.
Yeah.
And Mountain Shadow as kind of a narrator, commentator on the Outcast essays, kind of get some character development that way as well. There's a character there whose death would have an impact on the fans and the players and so forth, even if they had never, as characters, interacted with him necessarily. I mean, it's possible that they would have, but that's something that would have had an impact and a resonance because of that existence as a personality. Actually, Icewing gets a little bit of development in the old Barsave at War supplement because he's tied into the whole Ardelia Hefera thing, but not to the extent that Vasdenjas or Mountain Shadow or the Outcast get.
Yeah. So I think there's a number of ways to work in Vasdenjas's legacy or the other people in his orbit, because as Hydra's Bane, easy to work in. Greifswald, also easy to work in, especially if you're going to be a horror stalker. Go seek him out for any kind of assistance. Lotiara, also easy to work in as well. Now, motivationally speaking, it's a rumor that the Outcast put out there that Vasdenjas may have hidden other memory crystals around Barsave all over the place. Maybe not a different lair, but just in certain little hidey holes that only Vasdenjas knew about. Maybe his drakes know about. Who knows? And so that could be just a little tiny adventure nugget to drop in somewhere. Oh, you found this crystal. You don't quite know what it does. Perhaps you need to go see, one of the dragons. You've got two that like to meet with people. Greifswald especially. Lotiara also as well. And maybe Icewing. So, 3 dragons that maybe you can go see for advice on this crystal you may have stumbled upon.
Another thing that gets brought up in the essay is that Vasdenjas's study of patterns had led him to collect a number of notable pattern items, which means, as the Outcast says, the pattern items that could be found in Vasdenjas' lair could make the capture of one of Varulus' pattern items seem minor by comparison. No details are really spilled there, but basically, like, we know how significant it was that they obtained one of Varulus' pattern items. We know how important pattern items are
in general
because of that and because of other things and in general. But the fact that while, yes, there was the Rite of Succession and there were things that had happened and so forth, there was a layer that who knows how long it could have been before it was secured. There were items that could have found their way out of that trove and into various other places.
Yeah. Or into others' possessions.
You kind of talk about like story archetypes and whatnot. There's the idea of art from lost masters, or, you know, these items that are just kind of only rumored, but then crop up in an auction or whatever, some kind of MacGuffin that a lot of people are after for various reasons.
Yeah.
You could very easily tie that into Vasdenjas' hoard in some way and have dragons, any of the dragons really, be interested in getting involved in the pursuit of such an item because of the importance that it holds, both as something that would have conceivably been won as part of the Rite of Succession, but also how it's a interesting and or powerful item that you want to make sure is in the right hands.
Exactly. So I think Vasdenjas got a wonderful treatment posthumously. His servants and his helpers and his clutch of other dragons, adult dragons, got handled nicely as well. There's just enough there to whet your appetite, to maybe include them. You've got enough to go on a personality or description, and you've got enough motivation for all three of them. It's just like, they're there, whatever. No, there's a good paragraph that flushes them out significantly enough to be able to use them in a campaign if you want to. So I think Vasdenjas got a good send-off. Yeah.
I'm going to miss him, but I like what can come about as a result.
Fair. I also find that the essay has one little tidbit in there that does lay to rest that Outcast puts forth that Vasdenjas was intentionally lying about wyverns in the Creatures of Barsave book, that they're not dragons, but really they are dragons just in their adolescent stage, but he was trying to be nice to Thurmail's legacy and so forth. So that's the last little thing in there. So the truth has been finally at the end of this dragon series of podcasts. Wyverns are actually adolescent dragons. It's laid to rest. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Nope.
Any further thoughts on how people can maybe use Vasdenjas in a campaign? I mean, if you're going to set it before his death, obviously you can, if you're still back in that timeline.
Right.
But in 4th edition, timeline's been moved forward a little bit. I think there's plenty of opportunity to throw him in.
Yeah. And you've also still got Tiabjin, the scribe that physically wrote down the Creatures of Barsave book.
Absolutely.
Tiabjin actually also shows up in Empty Thrones at one point. He also has a presence there. No, I think we've covered everything pretty nicely with the old Talespeaker.
Eater of City, singular, not plural.
Eater of City.
Well, when you eat one, maybe you're going to eat... He just raised it to the ground. I mean, there was nothing left.
You eat one city, they never let you live it down.
You get a reputation, and a nickname, obviously. So, folks, that'll wrap us up for this episode on Vasdenjas. This actually should end our complete run on all of the dragons. Each dragon has now their own episodes. So if you want to include one in your campaign, feel free to go back and listen to that episode, get some ideas about it, and what Josh had to say about how to include them, where to go with it, why, the 5 W's, why not, like journalism, and kind of take it from there and run. So any further thoughts on now that we've wrapped up all the dragons? Was it fun?
No, it was fun. Dragons are great. I really enjoyed going back over this because, as I mentioned earlier in this episode, it had been a while since I had gone back and read these. And while I didn't read many of these before we actually recorded, getting reminded of a lot of this and paging through the PDF as we are discussing them reminded me of a lot of things and maybe go, oh, yeah, that's kind of cool. Let me file that away as something that we could possibly bring back and hook onto later if it seems interesting.
Fair.
I had not been super keen on the idea of a 4th edition Dragons book because I wasn't sure what to do with it.
Yeah.
That could potentially be different from what was already out there. I needed a hook, and there is enough information in here, enough loose ends in a way that inspired me to go, okay, now I've got some ideas that could potentially be useful if we decide to do a Dragons book and what kind of stories might develop in the present day of Barsave rather than have this simply be a reprint of a book that already exists in some form.
Yeah. So you've got some ideas on how to update each one of the personalities in their movings and goings on.
Right, but also just potential stories that could be there. Go back and listen to the Asante and Night Sky episode, and you can hear the cogs clicking in my brain as ideas come to me as we are speaking about it.
Yes.
The recognition of what's going on in terms of their relationship to the dragons and what that could be in terms of spiraling out more story and potential conflict and issues within that society.
Yeah.
And how that would consequently have repercussions at the adventurer level.
I like it. So somewhere down the pipeline.
I like it too.
So somewhere down in the pipeline, maybe perhaps.
I mean, we do not have a Dragons book
Slate.
even tentatively slated for anything right now.
No.
But now I could see that as a possibility.
Yeah.
Where I could not
Before.
as much a year ago.
No, it's okay. We're here to...
Or 6 months ago, or however long it was that we started this.
It feels like 6 months, doesn't it?
Who knows?
Who knows?
Time is weird.
It is. Especially when we record these and then release them weeks in the future. Yeah, I think we've got Josh's wheels working in his head. That hopefully that hamster doesn't fall off that wheel anytime soon.
Look, I've got wheels that need to be devoted to other things right now.
Fair.
I came across a thing on, I think it must have been on Facebook today, that's a play on the old "There Are Two Wolves Inside of You."
Yes.
This one was, there are two wolves inside of you. One wants to go gung-ho on a million new projects. The other doesn't want to do anything that it isn't perfect at right away.
Yep.
To which my reaction is, ooh, wow, it's like looking in a mirror.
Fair.
I've got some other stuff that I need to devote my attention to before spiraling off into dragon conspiracies and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah. Scratch some ideas down, come back to them later.
Sure.
That's what notepads are for. So, folks, until next time, if you have any questions for us,
Well, hold on. One last thing that I want to mention here before we do our
sign off.
wrap up.
Yeah.
Unrelated to dragons.
Hit it.
We don't do this very often, but again, we're here in episode 101.
Yeah.
If you like what we're doing, share, subscribe, rate, review. The reason that I mention that in particular is that if you listen to us on Spotify,
Yes.
where actually a notable portion of our listeners are on Spotify, at least according to the stats that I get.
It's like, what, 25%?
The mobile version, I don't have the numbers right in front of me.
Yeah.
The mobile version of Spotify recently, so this is the one that would be on your phone or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The mobile version of Spotify does now allow you to rate podcasts.
Oh, there you go.
So if you listen to us on Spotify, drop us a rating. It has not gone out to the desktop version yet,
Mm-hmm.
but if you have Spotify on your phone or tablet or whatever, you have the app for that, drop us a rating. That would be appreciated. That's all.
Favorable if you like us.
And if it's available on however other ways that you listen, obviously do it there too.
Yes.
But it's newly available on Spotify, so
we'll mention that.
there you go.
Absolutely. So if you do have any questions for us on rating us or whatever, drop us a line at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. It's been 100 episodes. If you don't know that email address by now, you're not paying attention.
Welcome.
Welcome to 101. But until next time, folks, go tell the tale of your own legend.
Good night, everybody.